I was about 12 years old when my parents made the exciting decision to purchase a charming farmhouse in Hopewell, Missouri. My brother, Chris, and I were ecstatic about our new home, particularly because it had an upstairs. The fact that my room happened to be bigger than Chris's was a delight that I savored. The staircase leading to the second floor was quite steep and narrow, so my dad, always the caring parent, thoughtfully added a rail on the left side to ensure that Chris wouldn't fall down the stairs when he sleepwalked at night. For context, Chris was around 9 years old at the time and had a habit of wandering around in his sleep, which added an additional layer of concern for our parents. At the top of the stairs, my brother's room was to the left, while my room was right next to it. I adored my spacious room, but Chris had the unique feature of slanted ceilings, which made his space feel cozy, albeit a bit constricting. Eager to explore our new surroundings, Chris and I decided to venture outside. As we made our way over to the barn lot, I noticed something peculiar hanging on the fence. As we got closer, a shocking sight met our eyes. Chris let out a terrified scream. It was a wooden leg. While my brother was panicking, I found myself utterly fascinated by the strange object. In my excitement, I picked it up and playfully chased Chris back to the house with it. However, our father saw this and immediately told us to stop playing with the leg. He took it and placed it in his closet, announcing it was better suited there than in our hands. While unpacking, I stumbled across a large trunk filled with old photographs. One picture caught my eye in particular. It portrayed an elderly man and woman standing in front of our house. To my surprise, the man in the photograph had a wooden leg, just like the one we'd found. A chill ran down my spine as I considered the eerie coincidence. As night fell and exhaustion set in, we all prepared for bed in our new place, surrounded by unfamiliar sounds that seemed to echo through the house. Suddenly, I heard what I thought was my mom coming up the old, creaky stairs. I sat up and called out to her, but there was no reply. Curious and slightly anxious, I headed to Chris's room to check on him. To my bewilderment, I saw a dim shape of a woman in a flowing white dress hovering over him. Panic surged through me, and I screamed as I flicked on the light, but just like that, the figure vanished into thin air. The following morning, I couldn't shake the strange vision from the night before. Later that day, Mom and Dad needed to gather some supplies from town, which was about 10 miles away. After we returned, excitement quickly turned to horror when Mom stepped into the kitchen and let out a deafening scream. As we rushed into the room, we found her standing in a pool of bright red liquid spreading across the kitchen floor. The linoleum, which had rips in it, seemed to suck up the substance, shooting it upwards with each stomp nearby. Fear gripped us as Dad sprang into action, immediately calling the police to report the unnerving situation. The officers arrived swiftly, conducting tests on the strange liquid and searching for any signs of an injury or struggle. Before long, they concluded that there was nothing in the kitchen to suggest anyone had been harmed. To our confusion, there were no trails leading away from where Mom had first discovered the bizarre substance. The test results wouldn't be available for a week, leaving our family on edge, fearing that someone might have been hurt in our kitchen. To distract ourselves, we decided to play cards at the kitchen table, adjacent to two massive windows that were notoriously difficult to raise and almost always slammed shut unexpectedly. We were all enjoying what was supposed to be a fun family game when, out of nowhere, the living room console TV roared to life at full volume. Confusion swept over all of us as Dad told Chris to go switch it off or turn the volume down. Chris hurried over to the TV, only to find that it had switched off on its own, and Dad insisted that there must be a loose connection. But when Chris went to unplug the cord, he found it in his hands. Nobody had even plugged in the television. My heart raced, and I couldn't contain my fear, screaming as Mom began to pray out loud. Dad tried to ease the tension, and we attempted to continue our card game, but the atmosphere in the room had changed. Later that night, as I settled into bed, I could hear the stairs creaking again. This time, however, I decided to lay still and see what happened. To my fright, I saw the same faint outline of a woman in a white dress glide past my brother's room and into my space. My heart pounded in my chest, fear rooted me in place as she glided closer to me. Finally, she floated right above my bed. Summoning all my courage, I closed my eyes tightly and waited. After a few agonizing seconds, I cautiously opened my eyes again. To my horror, the white figure was still there, hovering just inches above me. I screamed and dashed to the light switch, and when the room illuminated, the apparition vanished again as if it had never been there. In a flurry, I woke my parents, but Dad was furious. He yelled at me, demanding I be quiet or he would punish me with his belt. Terrified, I screamed back at him, and then a loud banging echoed from the kitchen, causing everyone to jump. Racing to the kitchen, we discovered the heavy windows I had struggled with earlier slamming up and down violently, and the back door swung open wide, as if propelled by an unseen force. In a moment of curiosity, I returned to the trunk of pictures to see if I could find any fragments of our home's past, wondering how it looked before my family arrived. Among the photos, I discovered an image of a woman named Mrs. Prater, dressed in a long, flowing white dress, standing beside a young boy and girl. She exuded an aura of beauty that captured my attention, but a sinking feeling settled in my stomach as it dawned on me that her attire was identical to what I had witnessed just nights before. Unease began to amplify within me. I needed to know more. Intrigued and terrified, we began to ask our neighbors in the quaint town of about 300 residents about the history of our home. They shared with us the tragic story of Mr. and Mrs. Prater, who had once lived there. Mr. and Mrs. Prater were said to have had 2 children, both of whom were born in that very farmhouse. However, their family life was marred by strife, as Mr. Prater was a violent alcoholic. Each night, he would return home after drinking, and every night, Mrs. Prater would run upstairs to check on the children, locking their doors tightly with her key to prevent their father from reaching them. The townsfolk recounted in hushed tones the turmoil that surrounded the Prater family. They revealed that one fateful night, in a drunken rage, Mr. Prater confronted his wife, resulting in a violent struggle that caused her to tumble down the stairs, nearly leading to her demise. In another instance fueled by alcohol-fueled fury, Mrs. Prater managed to grab a shotgun and shot off one of his legs in an attempt to defend herself. After that, the man was known to wear a wooden leg, which we discovered had been buried near. Pieces started to fall into place, the ghostly visits, the bloodstain, even the eerie sounds in the night. Mrs. Prater's spirit seemed to linger like an echo, watching over us, making sure the children in her house were safe. As the weeks turned into months, strange occurrences continued. The TV turning on, doors slamming shut on their own, unsettling scraping noises on the tin roof. But amidst the chaos, we grew accustomed to our spectral roommate. I began to think of Mrs. Prater as a watchful guardian, an otherworldly presence that filled the gaps in our otherwise sunny existence.